أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. My name is Mariam Khan, and this is the first of a series of webinars called the Family Halaqah. And this is part of the Muslim Educator Academy, and we're found at themuslimeducator.com. Just for those of you who are not familiar with the Muslim Educator, it's an online academy for children and families, and it's designed to offer classes, unique classes that you may not find elsewhere. For example, things like instead of Quran memorization, we do Quran journaling, or Quran, word-to-word translation, but for children. And not just adults, but for children as well, and incorporating hands-on activities and discussions. We also do things like book clubs, and we discuss surahs from a practical perspective, and specifically designed for kids, because a lot of times these opportunities are available for adults, but not for children. So we really want to offer those. I've just started a series of halaqahs, online halaqahs, and this is the first one. And joining us today will be our new instructor, Brother Tom Facchine. And just a brief introduction, and I'll let him introduce himself as well. He joins us this summer semester as an instructor. He converted to Islam in 2010 as he was finishing his bachelor's in political science. And since then, he has been studying and teaching Islam. He learned Arabic, and then he also went on to study at the University of Medina, as well as with other local scholars in Medina, and he is about to finish his bachelor's degree. He also, during the summers, works with youth and with various Islamic centers around the United States in teaching and da'wah. And we've asked him to join teaching with the Muslim Educator Academy because he has that same, different, I guess you could say, approach to teaching, in which, focusing on teaching Islam in a way that conveys deep understanding and meaningful application, and not just fact memorization. Facts are great, don't get me wrong, but moving beyond that into really having the type of high-level discussions that you normally don't expect kids are able to have, but he's able to bring those to the kids. And so we're pleased to have him join us. So without further ado, I will go ahead and turn it over to Brother Tom.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين نبينا محمد عليه أفضل الصلاة وأزكى التسليم اللهم علمنا بما ينفعنا وانفعنا بما علمتنا وزدنا علما يا رب العالمين. It's a pleasure to be with you all today. It's that introduction more than suffices. I don't think I need to tell you anything else about myself. But I'm happy to be here, and as Sister Mariam said, the goal here is to learn about meaning, learn about things that we can apply, not just learn the content in a way that we've memorized it, but it hasn't penetrated our hearts, it hasn't affected how we move through our day-to-day lives. No, as Sister Mariam said, there are plenty of places where you can get that. However, the Muslim community, especially in the West or the English-speaking world, is in a grave need, enormous need for instruction that is focused on applying these things and living these lessons. And that's the way of the companions. The companions used to not memorize more than 10 ayats of the Quran until they had understood it and applied what it meant in their own lives. That's not the way that we approach Islamic education. We approach Islamic education in general by, making it kind of like a peripheral subject, maybe a Sunday school, maybe an after-school program. And then even more than that, the things that how we're engaging with it is in a very kind of just rote memory sort of way. And that's why we have the phenomenon within the Muslim community in the Western and English-speaking world of people who have memorized the entire Quran yet they have girlfriends. And we have people who have memorized the entire Quran, yet they do drugs and they drink alcohol and they do all sorts of things. It's simply because we're going about education wrong. We're going about education in a way that might make sense if you're surrounded by an Islamic environment and you're in an Islamic country, an Islamic society, a place where you have other sorts of familial pressure and societal pressure to kind of enforce the kinds of morality that we expect of our young people. However, in a place like the Western world, where we're not surrounded by that, to the contrary, we're surrounded by the exact opposite, a society, an education system, and a pop culture that is calling to pretty much everything that Islam says isn't good, then that's not enough. Just memorizing the letters, knowing the ayats and the hadith, and knowing names and dates and places, guess what? It's not enough. And this is backed by research. This isn't just the eye test. Pew had released research within the last couple of years that indicates that all of the Muslims growing up in the United States of America, 1 in 4 of them will cease to identify as a Muslim by the time they're an adult. That's 25% is going to leave Islam by the time they're an adult. So clearly the things that we're doing aren't working. And so the Muslim educator is kind of an effort to refocus and to regroup and to kind of dig back into the Islamic tradition of education and study, and try to apply those sorts of things, especially with adults, of course, but also especially with our youth, so that we can protect the establishment of Islam in the West, starting with ourselves. So that is a good segue to what we're here to talk about today, because the subject of this webinar is purifying the heart, aka studying diseases of the heart and their cure. And if you weren't aware, we have a more in-depth series that is coming up where we're going to go into these problems and their solutions specifically one by one. However, today is kind of a bird's eye view, zooming out on the phenomenon in general and kind of prepping for that and prepping ourselves for that. So I want to start by discussing just a little bit of the last dua that I began with when I was giving my introduction, whether you guys understand Arabic or not. You know, I said at the end, Allahumma alimna bima yanfa'una wa anfa'na bima alamtana wa zidna ilman ya rabbal alameen. This is a dua the Prophet ﷺ used to make. And he says in it, Allahumma alimna bima yanfa'una. He said, teach us what benefits us. Wa anfa'na bima alamtana. And benefit us by what you've taught us. وَزِدْنَا عِلْمًا, and increase us in knowledge. And the scholars, they've said, if you scan the entire Quran, if you scan the Sunnah, the Prophet ﷺ asked for many, many things. By the way, what the Prophet ﷺ asked for in his dua is an extremely rich area of research. You can learn a lot of things just by meditating and pondering and kind of reading deeply into the things that he asked for and what he didn't ask for, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, because his priorities were set by Allah. And so his priorities should be our priorities. We didn't find him asking for certain things, and we found him asking for other things. And we found him asking for certain things in a specific way. So when it comes to the terminology zidna or zidni, which means increase me, the Prophet ﷺ never said this formula of increase me except for one thing, and that is knowledge, intelligence. So that's something that indicates the fadl of this thing, or the benefit or the superiority of this thing that the Prophet ﷺ was asking for. Now, the other part of the dua that he made, Rabbana or Allahumma alimna bima yanfa'una wa anfa'na bima alamtana, it kind of gives us a clue. It gives us a clue that there's, if we infer into the dua the Prophet ﷺ made, teach us what benefits us and benefit us by what you taught us, it's obvious that it's possible that we could learn things that don't benefit us. Or we might learn things that are beneficial, but it might not benefit us. So I want to start by, before we're talking about going into purifying the heart and how to do that and why we want to do that, by focusing in on this dua and these exact words. We're asking Allah to teach us. And we're asking us to teach us certain things and not others. it brings us back to kind of an open-ended question, I think. Why do we study anything in the first place? Why do we study math? Why do we study science? Now, STEM is big. You've got a lot of different things that schools are pushing. And I think most of you, if you guys are signed up for this webinar, you are interested in learning. You're people who like to learn. So we're talking about, why do we study? You know, a very short answer is we study to become more intelligent in general. We study something to learn more about it. Okay, well, that's very nice, but what is that intelligence? What is it like? What is it made up of? And how broad is it? If you go back into the root word of intelligence in the English language, it's actually very, very interesting, because the root, it's made up of two roots. Inter, the R was deleted when it comes because of sarf, because of morphology of the language. Inter, which means between, and legere in Latin, which means to be able to choose between two things. So intelligence literally means, in the English language, as we've inherited it from Latin, to choose between, or to develop the capacity to choose between. Basically, what we say these days is discernment. To be able to discern, to be able to look at something and choose between them, takes knowledge. If somebody wants to go down to the market and they want to buy a cantaloupe or a watermelon, it's summertime, he wants to buy a watermelon, and he sees two watermelons, and he's never seen a watermelon before. One of them is rotten and the other one isn't. He might not know which one's rotten and which isn't. He's not going to be able, he doesn't have the information, he doesn't have the intelligence, he hasn't developed the capacity to choose what's better for himself. So that capacity to choose what's better for yourself, that's developed through knowledge and intelligence. And that's extremely important, because it gets back to our Islamic concept of knowledge that the Prophet ﷺ indicated to us kind of secretly, or subtly, you should say, in this dua. Allahumma alimna bima yanfa'una wa anfa'na bima alamtana. There's going to be things that you can learn. There are certain kinds of intelligences that are not beneficial. There are things that you can learn that don't benefit you at all. And you guys, you know, you live in society, you have friends, you go on the street, you know that a lot of people, they are consumed by dedicating their time to studying things that don't necessarily benefit them. Your favorite soccer team, you probably know all 11 starters. You might even know things about the people's personal lives, or basketball, or whatever sports that you're kind of into. Video games, you know, some people these days, you know, they watch people live streaming their video games. Ninja, other people are very, very popular. You probably know people in your life, if not yourself, that know things about this person who they've never met, who they probably will never meet in their life, but they know lots of things about this person, about what they do, about how many kids they have, about their spouse, all these sorts of things. Is this beneficial information? No, it's not really. And we kind of know that, but it might be useful to take or to formulate an exact rule to help us determine what exactly is beneficial information and what exactly isn't. What's beneficial knowledge and what's not. What's beneficial intelligence and what is not beneficial intelligence. There are many, many, many different types of intelligence. There is academic intelligence, and this is what we typically think of when we think of the word intelligence. We think of somebody who can do algebra and trigonometry and geometry, and he knows physics and he knows chemistry, and he's able to do, you know, balance equations and write an essay and all these sorts of things that the SAT or the ACT or whatever standardized test that you're forced to take requires of you. But there's also other kinds of intelligence. There's physical intelligence. Some people who are professional athletes, they're able to watch somebody performing a certain motion and they're able to repeat it almost exactly. They can learn extremely quickly just by observing. And that learning has to do with the body, and it has to do with physicality. There's also social intelligence. Some people are social butterflies. Some people, like myself, we just hide in our rooms all day and read books. We're kind of introverted. But other people, they're the opposite. To lock them in a room and to make them read is like torture. They want to be seeing who's, you know, doing this, what's so-and-so doing, how have they been, I haven't talked to so-and-so. And they literally get energized by being around different people, by getting out and talking to people. This is a type of intelligence. Some people know how to treat people when they're going through a hard time. Some people know how to treat people or talk people down when they're angry. This is all social intelligence. There's also artistic intelligence. There are some people who are very, very gifted when it comes to making things, creating things, making poetry, making art, things like this. This is something that is a type of intelligence. These types of intelligence are very well known in our society. They're not all valued the same, but they're understood. Most people recognize that there's different types of intelligence, and that these particular types of intelligence, some people have more of one and more of another. Well, guess what? There's also such a thing called spiritual intelligence. Spiritual intelligence is one of the types of intelligence that has to do with what we're here to talk about today, purifying the heart. And we'll get into what it is in a second. But before we get into what it is, we've talked about all these different types of intelligence. We have academic intelligence, physical intelligence, social intelligence, artistic intelligence, spiritual intelligence. Out of all these types of intelligence, all these types of knowledge, which ones do our society value and which ones don't they value? Or are there any of them even that our society kind of looks down on? Yes, we have in the chat. If anybody has any questions, please use the chat box. You can raise your hand. You can do whatever you want. Most of you guys have already been with me one time. If you haven't been, my rule is there's no question that's off limits. So it doesn't have to be related to the lesson. You're having a hard day and you want to talk about it, I'd rather talk about it than talk about whatever presentation I've developed for you. So all these types of intelligence that we have, academic, social, physical, artistic, spiritual, what does our society value the most? How do we tell? How would you tell what a society valued the most? One way would be by seeing how much money they spend or how they pay people. Yes, exactly. We need visual success. Yes. How does a society pay different people and how much does it pay? So for example, in the United States of America, where I'm from, who gets the most money? Who's paid the most? In general, athletes, right? You hear these contracts with LeBron and now KD might be going to New York, and we've got Kawhi Leonard up in Toronto, and all these different things. Millions and millions and millions of dollars. They make more money than the president. They make more money than congressmen. They make more money than pretty much anybody. It reveals what our society values. Our society values this kind of physical intelligence because it's entertaining, because we watch it. We also have people that are artistically talented, people who, we're talking about musicians and artists and things like that. And we're not going into permissibility and saying those things are permissible, no. But what we're talking about is look at how much the society pays them. There's no doubt that they have a type of talent and they have a type of intelligence. And our society rewards them with millions and millions of dollars, lots of fame, endorsements from different companies. They're doing commercials, all these sorts of things. So our society puts the most value on people who are intelligent in a way that's entertaining. Okay, artists and physical intelligence. After that, our society values what are the jobs that normal people have. The people who are professional artists or are professional athletes or things like that, they're very, very few. They're a drop in the bucket. If you go to normal people, what are the most highest paying jobs? Highest paying jobs are doctor, lawyer, engineer. Everybody knows that. That's why most of our parents want us to go into those fields, right? So that as well tells us something about what our society values. Our society, after those two types of intelligence that are reserved for entertainment, then they value next highest academic intelligence. Academic intelligence is very important. Academic intelligence is what builds bridges. It's what builds buildings and skyscrapers. It keeps your water pure. It keeps your house insulated. It keeps your streets from draining. It keeps them draining when the rain comes. All these things are very, very important. There's no doubt. But if we keep going down the list, we're going to find, and this is the point, that spiritual intelligence is the least valued in our society. There is no job Not saying that there necessarily should be, but there is no job that gets paid for your spiritual intelligence, for the most part. And that's an indication of what our society values. Now, my question to you after that is, which type of intelligence is going to get us into paradise? And which type of intelligence is going to get us into Jannah and is going to save us after we die? Is academic intelligence going to save us? Is knowing how to do derivatives or integrals and calculus going to save us on the day of judgment or when we die? Is being able to, perform plastic surgery or any other type of surgery, is it going to? Yes, very good, thank you. We are going to clarify spiritual intelligence just in 1 second. All these sorts of things are not going to get you in paradise, but the one that is the most neglected, the least valued, is spiritual intelligence. So what is spiritual intelligence? Spiritual intelligence, in a sentence, is essentially the paths we have to develop virtue. How to train ourselves to see opportunities that are going to purify our souls, that are going to make us more upright people, more moral people, that we're going to do the right thing, that we are going to conform ourselves, our feelings, and our actions to the standard that Allah Azza wa Jal wants us to be held to, and conform ourselves to the standard that the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ wants us to conform to. That's what spiritual intelligence is. An example. Somebody who, it's 2 o'clock, and their favorite soccer team is playing at 2 o'clock. And their sister walks in the door. And their sister is crying. And that person has been waiting weeks and weeks and weeks for the soccer match. It's the final. Their team's in the final. Who's going to have the spiritual intelligence to turn the TV off and to fight against their selfishness and to fight against their ego and do the right thing and console their sister? Spiritual intelligence is if you have a relative who's out of a job and is too proud to ask you for help, for money. Who's going to have the spiritual intelligence to be able to get them money without them having to ask for it and thus degrade themselves? Spiritual intelligence is the ability to have other people hate your guts and you still treat them in the way that Allah wants you to treat them, because your trade and your interaction and your transaction is not with them, it's with Allah Azza wa Jal. That is, in essence, what spiritual intelligence is. And that's the kind of intelligence that's going to get you in paradise. We are not saying that the other types of intelligence are not important. No, they are. They make us be able to live a comfortable life, often. At the very least, they're entertaining. Most of other intelligences are permissible. And they're applied in often permissible ways. And they're essential for you to develop as well. But what I'm telling you now is I'm telling you that the society that we live in doesn't say anything about this other kind of intelligence and neglects it and even degrades it. Every time somebody makes a moral decision for themselves or has some advice to give to another person, don't judge me. So-and-so is so judgmental. Somebody does something, let's say someone wears niqab. How many times have I heard this in the masjid? A woman is wearing niqab. She hasn't said anything to anybody else telling them to wear niqab. And the sisters that aren't wearing niqab are talking bad about her behind her back because she's made a decision for herself and her morality and her spirit. Oh, she's just doing it to show off. Oh, she's just doing it because of this. Oh, she's just doing it. Our society has inculcated us with a disrespect for spiritual intelligence. And so that's why we need, and I need, to focus on spiritual intelligence and build it up in people in order to compensate for the damage done to it in our everyday society. Because you already get every sort of message from school and from TV and from commercials and from movies and from the internet telling you that academic intelligence is important, telling you that physical intelligence and even social intelligence is important. Who is telling your children that spiritual intelligence is important? Very, very, very few people. So spiritual intelligence is about identifying paths to develop virtue and to train ourselves to see spiritual opportunities, opportunities to better our soul, opportunities to purify our heart. This can take a multitude of ways. Humility is spiritual intelligence. Being able to put yourself in the service of others is spiritual intelligence. Being able to be on a bus or a train and there's an elderly person or a pregnant woman and standing up and giving them your seat. This takes humility and it takes service. Having somebody teach you something or try to teach you something and you already know it, but you don't want to make the other person feel bad, and so you pretend you don't know it. That's humility and that's spiritual intelligence. This is the way of our scholars. There was a famous hadith scholar who had a student who began teaching his teacher, his sheikh, a hadith. The teacher, the sheikh, not only knew the hadith, he had narrated the hadith. He was one of its narrators in the chain. I believe the story is about Sufyan al-Thawri. And he, to his student, acted as if he had never heard the hadith before. In order to bring his nafs, to bring his pride and ego down. And in order to exemplify this sort of spiritual intelligence. Generosity is an extremely important pathway for spiritual development. It's a type of spiritual intelligence. Generosity not only with your money, not only with dedicating a portion of your wealth to the masjid, or dedicating a portion of your estate to an endowment that's going to help Muslims for generations until the Day of Judgment. But being generous with your time and with your friendship and your companionship. How many of us were only friends with people we benefit from? We're only friends with people who we stand to gain something from, even if that gain is just entertainment and things that we have in common and comfort. Most of us operate in this way. Most of us won't spend time with people who we don't like. It seems crazy. It seems absurd. Why would you spend time with people you don't like? Well, it's very, very possible that that person might need your time. That person might be going through something very, very difficult. A divorce, a lost child, a lost parent, a lost relative, a lost job. And you might hate that person's guts. They might annoy you. They might have poor manners. They might be ingrateful. But the person with spiritual intelligence is going to take some of their time, not all of their time, they're going to take some of their time and they're going to dedicate it to that person. Not because they're going to get anything out of that person, but because they expect to get something out of their Lord, Azza wa Jal. Paths for developing virtue. In addition to humility, in addition to service and generosity, we have patience. The scholars, they talk about patience a lot. And many of them have divided patience into three categories. There's patience in doing good and worshiping Allah. When you have the patience to wake up for Fajr consistently, that is a type of spiritual intelligence. You're demonstrating spiritual intelligence. When you are able to make all of your sunnah prayers regularly, when you're able to dedicate even just 2 rak'at a night to make night prayer, that's spiritual intelligence. When somebody is able to do extra fasting, when somebody is able to do all the other things that Allah has commanded, and do it for the right reasons. Do it because he's not getting any recognition. He's just doing it, or she's just doing it to please their Lord. That is spiritual intelligence. Another type of patience, other than being patient in doing good, is refraining from evil. In our society, it takes an immense, enormous amount of patience to resist doing evil. Evil is everywhere. Everybody's trying to get you to gossip about somebody, whether it's a Muslim or a non-Muslim, whether it's a head of state or it's your next door neighbor, whether it's your sister or some sheikh on YouTube. Everybody's trying to get you to gossip. Our society is trying to get you to have girlfriends and waste your time. We know these things. I don't need to go into nitty-gritty details. We know these things. Our society is trying very, very, very hard to get us to commit evil. Because why? Evil makes money. Gambling now, sports betting in the United States has become legal for states outside of Nevada. All these sorts of things. Doing evil is so easy. The smartphone, the devil's favorite invention, I think probably in the history of mankind. People can be talking to the opposite sex and nobody knows. People can be looking at pornography and nobody knows. All these sorts of things. It's so easy to do evil in this day and age. We've reached the time the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ talked about. The Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, he said that we would reach a day where somebody holding onto their religion would be like someone holding onto a hot coal. Why? Because it's your desire that wants to just let go of that coal and drop it and say, oh, I can't be patient with it. I can't be patient with the burning sensation. It takes patience to refrain from doing evil in today's society. That is spiritual intelligence. The last type of patience the scholars talk about is being patient when disaster strikes, and this is something that most of us think of when we think about patience. There are people in the world, in places where there is war, in places where there is horrible things going on, in Syria and in Yemen, where people's families are slaughtered in gruesome ways. And at the end of the day, they can still say, Inna lillah wa inna ilayhi raji'un. And they can still say, Alhamdulillah. And they can still make their prayers on time. And they can still go to the masjid. They can still go and give charity. And then there are people, in an objective sense, who have material circumstances, who have a way easier life than that. And a small thing happens. And they are thrown into a crisis of faith. Why me? Why did Allah do this to me? He didn't give me the job I wanted. He didn't give me the spouse I wanted. It's not fair. It takes patience and spiritual intelligence to be able to do the right thing in that scenario. Spiritual intelligence is also being helpful, not waiting to be asked, taking initiative to help our brothers and sisters, whether it's holding a door or visiting somebody before they fall ill, especially with how we treat our elders. Being modest is a part of spiritual intelligence. And what gets most attention here, obviously, is the way that we dress. But there is more than that to modesty. Modesty includes the way that we speak, what we laugh at, the way that we treat other people. Some people, they cover their hair or they cover their awrah, and yet they gossip about other people. And you can hear them laughing from across the room, across the building. This isn't the type of modesty that the companions or the Prophet ﷺ practiced. The Prophet ﷺ, when he laughed, they said his laugh was his smile. Reserved, something of being reserved, not in a cold way, in a tender way, in a compassionate way, but being reserved, being modest, not putting out everything for everybody to see. Now we have the term extra, right? That's come into our vocabularies from social media. Not being extra. Being extra is something that the companions and the Prophet ﷺ didn't know. It's not something that they practiced. They stayed even keel. Not too much up, not too much down. Ali radiallahu anhu, he has a beautiful saying. He said don't love anybody too much because tomorrow they might become your enemy. And don't hate anybody too much because tomorrow they might become your friend. This is the kind of equanimity that the Muslim is supposed to have. Because at the end of the day, we're not affected spiritually by what other people are doing. There's certain ways in which we are, but what I'm saying is everybody's responsible for themselves. And so if you're really focused on Allah and your relationship with Allah, then what the other people do, you're going to be able to, as we say, let it roll off your back. It's not going to bother you. This is all the first part of spiritual intelligence. First part of spiritual intelligence is recognizing pathways to develop virtue, to develop good habits and good practices. I'll talk about three different ways to develop spiritual intelligence. That's the first way. The second way is knowing what I call our spiritual anatomy. Just like doctors, they study the anatomy of the body. They know this is the nervous system, this is the skeletal system, this is the muscular system. They know the different systems of the body independently, how they interact, and what that means for when they have to make a change in that system that is the body. Guess what? Our spirit also has an anatomy. Allah and the Prophet ﷺ told us in the Quran and the Sunnah exactly how our hearts work and exactly how our spirit operates. The Prophet ﷺ taught us that the heart becomes blackened when we sin, and that when we commit good deeds, it polishes it and it removes that blackness. The Prophet ﷺ also taught us, and it's also in the Quran, that the soul has three parts to it. One of those parts is your inner conscience. It's the one that wants to bring you back. It's that little voice in the back of your head when you're about to do something bad. It tells you, you know what, you really shouldn't do this. And then another part of the soul is the part that wants to do those bad things, the part that the devil tries to whisper to and give you ideas. No, you should do that. Oh, that person, they looked at you, they don't think you're anything. No, they're probably talking behind your back. Oh, they meant to do this. Oh, they meant to slight you. All these little ideas that the devil puts into our heads, it affects this part of our soul. So spiritual intelligence is knowing that we have these different parts of our soul and acting accordingly. Listening to that inner voice, that inner conscience, whatever part of fitrah that we have that is still maintained and is still protected. That is part of spiritual intelligence. Recognizing when the devil is putting ideas into our head and when our nafs, our desire, our appetites are being stoked, are being appealed to. That is part of spiritual intelligence. Specifically, there are things in the Quran and the Sunnah that Allah told us about that we are going to have problems with. It's as if the revelation that Allah gave us in the Quran and the Sunnah was a roadmap to paradise. And the roadmap contains in it all of the dangerous places, all of the dead ends and all the dangers, wherever there's going to be an ambush, wherever there's going to be an attack, wherever you're going to be most vulnerable. Allah and the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ told us about it and warned us about it. So part of spiritual intelligence is paying heed. First of all, educating yourself. What are those things? Where are they? What did Allah say? What did the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ say? And then taking heed, what do I do? Allah told us in the Quran that people are argumentative, that we love to argue, and we love to correct other people, and we like to poke holes in what they're trying to do. The Prophet ﷺ also said this to some of his companions at times. So taking that information and knowing it and fighting against it. What part of our ego is being satisfied by being argumentative? And trying to tame that part of ourselves. That is part of spiritual intelligence. Wealth, the love of wealth, is a disease that Allah talks about over and over and over again in the Quran. Al-Hakum al-Takathur, Hatta zurtumul maqabir. You love, just increase more and more and more until you're not going to be satisfied, until you are down in your graves. The Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, he said that if the son of Adam, meaning any one of you or me, had a valley full of gold, he would want another one. And the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ also said that people will not be satisfied. They will keep on, for example, putting things in their mouth because food tastes so good and it's so good to eat and to consume. They will not be satisfied until their mouth is filled with the dust of their graves. This is what we have clear guidance for. Allah told us about it. We love wealth. Shadid, Allah describes in Surah Al-Adiyat. How is the character of our love for these things? وَإِنَّهُ لِحُبِّ خَيْرِ لَشَدِيد. He is violent, he is extreme, he is intense in his love for these things. Khair, wealth. And so we need to take this information seriously and check ourselves. I knew, subhanAllah, I went to visit Canada one time to do some programs up in Canada. I met many of the Muslims up there. I'm not going to say which city. I met somebody who had a Ferrari. MashaAllah, tabarakallah. And they had it in their garage. And they had a window in their house that was looking out onto their garage. But they weren't happy with just having the Ferrari. They actually rebuilt their garage so one of the walls was a window. So when they were sitting in their living room, they could look out of their window and see their Ferrari sitting in their own garage. إِنَّهُ لِحُبِّ الْخَيْرِ لَشَدِيدٌ. You love wealth intensely, very much so. So we have to make sure that we purify ourselves and we take that into account. This is spiritual intelligence. Love of the opposite sex is one of the most intense types of loves and desires. We have many of these examples of fierce intelligence. That's true. Sister Mariam has a very good point. A lot of people don't connect the dots with these things. They don't think that this has to do with purification of the soul. They think that purification of the soul, I don't know, I guess is just saying please and thank you and listening to the shaykh and respecting your parents. All things that serve the parents, right? Because the parents like to be listened to and the shaykh likes to be listened to, right? So we talk about, when we talk about purification of the soul, yeah, tahira, it is like fasting from bad habits. So when we talk about purification of the soul, even the ways in which purification of the soul has been talked about is extremely narrow. Really, we're talking about upending our entire lives, but more than that, more than our entire lives, it's more about upending our perspective and our attitude and our mindset. It's about becoming a spiritual opportunist. It's about looking at things through the spiritual lens, because it's not about having money and not having money. The companions had money. Abu Bakr was rich. Uthman was rich. Yes, Sister Mani, we're raise the dhikr and prayer. Exactly. Very good. There were rich people amongst the Muslims, and that was very important. We need rich people. We need doctors. We need lawyers. We need people who make a ton of money. That's good. But, as the scholars say, you keep the money between your hands. Something that you take in, you give out. You take in, you give out. And not something that's in your heart. I don't know people's hearts. I don't know what people's intentions are. But if somebody builds a window in their house so they can see their Ferrari, I'm saying that that wealth is probably in that person's heart. It's not as if somebody's making a ton of money and they have a nice house, but then they also build the masjid, right? This is something that's different. Nobody's saying you can't benefit or take advantage of the wealth that Allah gives you. Allah loves to see the sign of gratitude on His servant. And the Prophet ﷺ warned people against dressing or living in a way that betrayed or contradicted their actual station. So the rich people not necessarily dressing like poor people. However, the rich people dressing like, okay, but also not caring. Here's the test. The litmus test is, how would you be if it was all gone tomorrow? If you're the same person, whether you have it or not, then Nihal al-Masri says, وَإِنَّهُ لِحُبِّ الْخَيْرِ لَشَدِيدٌ. No, al-khair in this context means al-mal. Nihal. If you look at the ayahs to either end of it, before and after, it gives you the context of this ayah. Because to say that if we mean by khair to do good deeds, it doesn't fit with the context of the surah at all. Because the next ayah is what? أَفَلَا يَعْلَمُ إِذَا بُعْثِرَ مَا فِي الْقُبُورِ. It's wa'id. It's something that is a warning to people. It's saying, basically, what comes before, he's saying, don't you take heed? Don't you think for a second that you're going to be thrown out of your graves on the Day of Judgment? And that statement wouldn't make any sense if the ayah before was talking about he loves to do good deeds. The khair that Allah is talking about here in the surah is the khair of the dunya, the wealth, the children, the other things that we're going to talk about on our list. We stopped at the opposite sex. The Prophet ﷺ said that there was no greater trial that he left behind for the men of his ummah except women. And we know very well how even religious teachers and scholars can be led down by the devil through impropriety with the other sex. Very, very easy. The devil is an expert. He's the master in the black arts. He knows human beings. He knows how our hearts operate. And he knows how to whisper in you these false justifications. So the sister just, we're just talking. We're just friends. That's how it starts, right? You're on WhatsApp and she's on WhatsApp. Or you're on Facebook and she's on Facebook. Somebody likes a comment. And you notice it. And then you go on their profile and you like a comment back. And then some weeks pass and then someone sends somebody a message, a private message. And then a conversation happens. Nobody leaves the front door in the morning saying, I am going to go commit fornication. Nobody does it. Very few people. The way the devil deals with us, and we're going to talk about this in a bit, is he brings you down step by step, so slowly, it's as if you're in a pot on the stove and he's just slowly turning up the heat so that he fries you, so that you don't even feel it. And he'll give you rationale and rationalizations and pretext the whole way. Dealing with the opposite sex is something that takes a lot of care, and it takes having principles before you get involved in a hard situation. Because guess what? Once your heart's involved, you're not going to be able to see clearly. You're not going to be able to stop talking to this girl or stop talking to this boy. You've already developed feelings for that person. You're already in an emotional relationship with that person. And then you're going to want your parents to bless the relationship. And when they say no, you're going to be crushed. You're going to be angry at your parents. And you might even do something haram. All because you didn't have principles before you went into the situation. I'll tell you something. As somebody who has something of a public persona, and somebody who gets messages from women in my inbox asking me questions, sometimes intimate questions that are religious questions, I have strict rules for myself. My wife sees every single message that's in my inbox. And if someone starts making small talk that's not a question, I say, do you have anything else to ask? If not, salam alaikum. You'll be shocked at what people say. That we could talk about this for an entire class period. I don't want to belabor this point. We have more to get to. But this is knowing our soul. Allah told us, and the Prophet ﷺ told us that we are this way. That's why Allah said, وَلَا تَقْرَبُوا الزِّنَا. Don't even come close to it. Allah didn't say, لَا تَفْعَلُوا زِنَا. لَا تَزْنِي. He didn't say that. He didn't say, don't commit fornication. No. He knows that the issue is so dangerous that you can start walking down the path, step by step by step, and then you fall. And so he said, don't even get close to it. Take the means to keep yourself far away from it. Other things. What did Allah tell us about? He told us that we love praise. We love the praise of other people. And so you'll find people that will do things that are wrong and will not do things, refrain from doing things that are right just to gain the praise of other people. this is something that's a spiritual disease. It takes spiritual intelligence to recognize that this is in you, to know that you have a little bit of a people pleaser inside of you and that you need to struggle against that. The same thing for love of your own reputation. Anybody who slights you, anybody who has the smallest bit of disrespect for you, you fly off the handle and you get really defensive because you're all about you. You have an ego. So if somebody, I have to give a khutbah or whatever, if I'm giving a talk and then somebody doesn't give me salams, or somebody doesn't stand up to give me salams, or somebody doesn't, I don't know, invite me over to his house, or somebody doesn't do this, and I get offended, I'm not doing things for the right reasons. I have a spiritual disease. My spiritual intelligence is low. The love of reputation and the ego, the love of ourselves, is a disease that we know we have. This person with spiritual intelligence realizes this, believes Allah, believes the messenger, and takes heed and takes a pathway within their lives to develop a virtue that's going to counteract that fact of nature. That's number two. So number one was knowing the paths to develop virtue. That's the good part. That's the plus sign. The second part was knowing our own spiritual anatomy, knowing what Allah told us about our own selves. This is the negative sign. This is the minus. And making plans for responding to that and preparing for that. The third part is knowing that the devil is real. And we've just mentioned a lot of different examples in which the devil, he's bringing people down slowly, slowly, slowly. Some people, many people, many Muslims are under the belief that if they continue to do the same things year in and year out, that they are going to be in paradise, that they will never have any problems in their religion. And that's a lie. How do I know it's a lie? Because the devil exists. And the devil is not going to leave you alone. He's not going to sit back and watch you and let you stay even. He's going to keep working on you. Whatever it is, every one of us has something in their hearts, whether it's lust, whether it's greed, whether it's stinginess, whether it's pride, whatever it is, the devil knows it, and he has a plan for you, whether or not you have a plan for him. And he's waiting for his opportunities to bring you down step by step by step as far as he can go. So it would take somebody who's extremely negligent and extremely heedless and extremely entitled, who would assume that they're already okay. It would take somebody extremely entitled to not develop a plan for themselves to progress in their religion, to improve, to get better and better and better, because they know that on this train, there's no standing still. You're either going forwards or you're going backwards. Either you're developing yourself or the devil's bringing you down. That is spiritual intelligence. The importance of studying all these things, it should be apparent. It should be apparent from everything that we've already mentioned. But there's another level to why studying the heart, purifying the soul, is important. And this relates much more to our first introduction, talking about the different types of intelligence and which intelligences are valued and which aren't, and talking about the way that the Muslims have contemporarily dealt with Islamic education in the West and in English-speaking lands. And the simple point is that wherever you go, if you go back hundreds of years, you go back to the scholars, Abu Hanifa, Imam Malik, Imam Shafi'i, Imam Ahmed, and before them and after them, the scholars were all taught manners and purification of the heart first. Why is that? It's very simple. Because knowledge is not inherently good or bad. We said at the beginning, Allahumma allimna bima yanfa'una wanfa'na bima 'allamtana. Teach us what benefits us and benefit us by what you taught us. There are people who can learn and learn and learn, and their intelligence and their knowledge is only going to add to their punishment on the Day of Judgment. The Prophet Muhammad ﷺ said that the first 3 people to enter the hellfire are the phonies, the phony scholar who did it for the wrong reasons. They didn't have spiritual intelligence. They learned the Quran, they learned the Sunnah, they learned the ikhtilaf, the differences of opinion, the statements of the scholars. They were able to recall it all. But they did it why? They did it so that people would say he's a scholar, he's an alim, mashallah. And like that, the reciter of the Quran. And like that, the mujahid, the person who fights in the way of Allah. And like that, the person who's rich. In a different narration, there's 2 different narrations. Those are the first people to enter the hellfire. And the people that are in the bottom of the hellfire. Because the knowledge is neutral. The things you learn. There are kuffar, there are non-Muslims in Oxford and Cambridge and Columbia and NYU that know more about Islam than everybody in this room. Myself included. But it doesn't benefit them. And it won't benefit them on the Day of Judgment. Because the knowledge is neutral. It's your intention that matters. And your spiritual intelligence. And your sincerity. So knowledge can be for us or against us. Even the devil. We talked about the devil and how he acts and how he plans against us. The devil has more certain knowledge of Allah than any of us. The devil spoke with Allah. The devil knows with certainty that Allah exists. Has that knowledge benefited him? No. Because of why? Because his pride. Because he had knowledge without spiritual intelligence. And so it didn't benefit him at all. So this subject that we're talking about, purification of the heart, is immensely important. It's extremely important. The Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, he said that he was only sent to perfect manners. He said he was only sent to perfect manners. Now, if you're a thinking person, that should set off alarms. That should raise red flags. That shouldn't make sense initially. Why? Because the religion is much more than manners. We have laws. We have haram and halal. We have worship. We have all these different things. How is it possible that the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ was just sent for manners? Again, this gets back to Maryam's comment when she said that people assume it's just either dhikr or prayer or saying please and thank you or listening to your parents. The Prophet ﷺ did not have that understanding of character. He did not have that understanding of manners. He certainly didn't have that understanding of spiritual intelligence, because the Prophet ﷺ said, I have only been sent to perfect manners. So our idea of manners is what's wrong. He, sallallahu alayhi wasallam, was talking about something much bigger. Because if you look at Islam, all of it is manners. You have manners between you and Allah. And that includes your belief, your aqidah, your creed, your doctrine. It includes your worship, because worship is doing the things that Allah wants you to do in the way that Allah wants you to do them. It's servitude to Allah and worship to Allah in the way that He wants, that He gets to decide who's worship, what is worship and what isn't. That is between your manners with Allah. You have manners when it comes to your own soul, between you and yourself. Your prayer, your fasting. Prophet Muhammad ﷺ said that your fasting is only for you, meaning that nobody else knows that you do it. You can fast all day and nobody else knows. Pilgrimage, the other acts of worship, this is all for your benefit. So it's about the manners between you and yourself. And finally, everything else falls into the category of manners between you and the rest of Allah's creation. The charity that you give, zakah and sadaqah, the visitation to the elderly and the poor and the sick and the dead, the mutual aid. The Prophet ﷺ said that Allah is in the aid of a person insofar, meaning as much as that person is in the aid of his brother. Gift giving. The Prophet ﷺ and the companions had a habit and a ritual of giving gifts to each other. This is all your manners with the creation. And for this reason, the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, he said that for the scholar, I mean the person with knowledge of this religion, the person with spiritual intelligence, every creature on earth seeks his forgiveness, even the fish in the sea. The fish in the sea? How are the fish in the sea? Why are they going to ask forgiveness for me? The scholars have said, explaining this hadith, because the scholar is going to give everybody their rights. He's going to fear Allah in everything he does. He's not going to pollute. He's not going to abuse. He's not going to take advantage of. He's going to care for absolutely everything. Everything in front of him and behind him. The pure intention. We have a question. The pure intention. How can I guarantee my intention that it's only for the sake of Allah? Sir, you have to sign up for the class and we'll talk about it in detail, inshallah. Good question. It's important. The most important question. The highest stakes. That question has the highest stakes. Because if it's for Allah, then everything you do is for you. And if it's not for Allah, then everything you do is against you. وَنَعُوذُ بِاللَّهِ مِنْ ذَلِكَ. All of the worship that we have, that Allah gave us. Why did He give us worship? If we want to know the importance of spiritual intelligence, why did He have us worship? Why did He tell us to do this and not do that? Why did He tell us to pray 5 times a day? Why did He tell us to fast 1 month out of the year? Why did He tell us to make pilgrimage at least once in our lifetime? Okay, there's a couple different reasons. Because of who Allah is? Yeah, sure. Allah is everything. When it comes to providing for us, He's the most merciful, He's the most powerful, He's the everlasting, He's the first and the last. All of these things, yes, Allah deserves to be worshipped. That's one answer, but there's more than one answer. Why do we worship? Why do we obey Allah? We obey Allah because it pleases Him. Okay, we're getting warmer. That's true. But we also obey Allah because it refashions our souls. We believe that Allah has legislated His Sharia, His law, and everything in it. Not abathan, not just a game, not just a test, not just let me see you jump through hoops. No, because we believe that Allah has structured every single act of worship to restructure our soul and restructure our hearts and purify it in preparation to enter paradise. Allah wants our purification. Allah wants our salvation. And Allah knows that nothing that is not pure will get into paradise. Nothing impure is going to enter into paradise. Allah knows this. And the Prophet ﷺ communicated it to us. So Allah has given us the Sharia and has given us the acts of worship and has given us our manners for everything we do from morning to night and even when we sleep. Using the bathroom and being intimate with our spouses. Every single thing. Because it is designed to refashion us, to repurpose us, to purify our souls and our hearts so that we may enter paradise. This work of repurposing and refashioning the soul and purifying it is work that is neglected and abandoned in the West, in the English-speaking world, and even within the Muslim communities. Finally, and I think we'll end with this because we're running out of time, just a couple examples of the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ and the other prophets, because they are our examples. When Allah says in Surah Al-Fatiha, or when He gives us the words to ask for guidance, He says, "Ihdina as-sirata al-mustaqim." Okay, what's sirat? What path? Guide us to the straight path. The one thing that we ask for in Surah Al-Fatiha, we ask for guidance. The straight path. What's the straight path? Allah answers it in the next ayah. Sirat al-ladina an'amta alayhim. The path of those who have earned your blessings. Who are those people? Who are the people we know with certainty? Or the people that Allah has blessed? The prophets. Having spiritual intelligence was a prerequisite for all of the prophets. Recall the story of the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ when he was 5 and the angel Gabriel came and split his chest open and rinsed his heart with Zamzam water and removes from it the bit of his heart that would call to evil. That was spiritual purification. Think about Khadijah and how she comforted the Prophet ﷺ after he began to get revelation by saying, Allah will not scorn you. He will not reject you. He will not do anything bad to you. Why? Because you give charity and you take care of the poor and you join relations with your family. Thus was the spiritual intelligence of the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ. Allah says in the Quran to the Prophet ﷺ, He said, if you had been severe with them, then they surely would have fled from you. The gentleness and the spiritual intelligence of the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ. When Allah commanded Moses to go to Fir'aun, He told Moses, speak kind words to him. To Pharaoh, if the Prophet Moses was instructed to have kind words to the Pharaoh, then everybody else in the world, min babil awla, then even more so. The Hajj says, someone told me that as-sirat is the straight path in this life, not as-sirat to al-Jannah. That is correct, Nihal. The sirat in Surah Al-Fatiha is not the sirat that we're going to cross on the Day of Judgment. No, the sirat is the straight path in this life. And that path is the path of whom? The path of the prophets. Sirat al-ladina an'amta alayhim. We have many, many, many examples. We've already gone over an hour. I will conclude with this. This is the purpose. This requires what we're trying to do here. Talking about meaning, talking about spiritual purification. It is a life's work. And it is an entire revolution in how we think about things and our perspectives. It takes training ourselves to move through our daily lives, noticing everything in our lives as an opportunity for spiritual growth. Just like the businessmen go through their lives with X-ray vision, trying to identify what's going to make them their next profit in this world. Purifying our hearts is developing the same vision and the same opportunism when it comes to recognizing the things that are happening in our daily lives that are opportunities for spiritual growth, for inculcating these habits of virtue, of repelling and striving against, and training and bringing to heel these attributes that Allah has created in us, these appetites that Allah has created in us, and taking all due precaution to avoid the path and the plots of the devil. With that, we conclude. Alhamdulillah. Wassalatu wassalam ala Rasulillah. If anybody has any questions, we can take them, and we'll turn things over to Sister Maryam.
Jazakallahu khairan for that talk. I just want to encourage everyone. We'll give about 10 minutes for question, answer / discussion. And so please feel free. You can also use your mic if you'd like to. There's a raise hand button. You can click on the raise hand button, and then that will allow you to talk, and you can speak, or you can type it in the chat box. You can also submit through the there's a Q&A button. I just want to add to one point at the end, this idea of looking things, through lenses. And those of you who are familiar with, the Muslim Educator a little bit, that's one thing that we talk about a lot. And my students, they always hear me talk about that is your Muslim lenses. That's a big thing. Is anything in life, anything you see around you, anything you hear, you're perceiving it through those Muslim lenses. So for example, What we do is when we read novels and we have book clubs, we use this idea, this concept of the Muslim lens. Okay, well, when you're reading it, how can you make a connection between that and your spirituality? We don't have this concept of, to God, what is to God, and to Caesar, what is to Caesar. In other words, separate religion from everyday life. Nihal, is this class going to be every Sunday? Ideally, I would like to do something like this once a month. Um, Catcher in the Rye. Oh man, don't get me started on Catcher in the Rye, Tahira. Okay. But yeah, there you go. That's a good connection, and that's another thing, that we're all about connections, making connections between, and I think that really relates to it too, this idea of training yourself to see things. I remember when we went for Umrah, Sheikh Abu Isa, he talked about how in Surah Al Imran, when it talks about how Maryam alayhi salam, she had rizq that was given to her. And when Zakaria alayhi salam, he saw that the rizq was just coming to her. And she said, this is from Allah. هُنَالِكَ دَعَا زَكَرِيَّا رَبَّهُ. Right there and then, he made dua to Allah for righteous offspring. And so, in other words, it was a trigger. He saw something. It taught him this lesson that Allah can make miracles happen. Right away, he responded with that, and that was his spiritual intelligence. And so what he said is that we have to train ourselves. This purification of the soul is not some kind of arcane rituals of say this thing 10,000 times or this, that, or the other. It's about learning to see things differently. So anyway, yeah, so we'll try now to do something like this once a month, whether with Sheikh Tom, if he has time, or with other speakers as well. If you could talk about the intention a little bit for a few minutes and maybe introduce what your class is going to be about, I think that would help. And also there's a question, is this class only for adults or any other session for kids as well? This particular class, I mean, this is our first quote unquote family halaqah. And so it's really designed to be multi-age, and maybe Tom can speak a little bit more to that. I don't know, I can't speak for him, but I know for me, I'm a big proponent of multi-age groupings. Like, bring your kids to something like this. Yeah, maybe they won't understand every little thing, but you can have them on the mic ask a question or type in their question. He'll answer your question, you can discuss it with them. We don't have this concept of like, this is just for the adults, this is just for the kids. And we want to have a lot of things that are really awesome. You guys are, Numair, your family, you guys are mashallah. I can always count on your family, alhamdulillah. So go ahead, Brother Tom, if you can talk a little bit maybe about your class and about the idea of the intention and anything else you want to address.
Sure. Well, just want to quick echo completely the sentiment of the more the merrier. I mean, they say, for example, when we started learning Arabic, they used to say that if you understand at least 40% of what's on the page, then you keep reading. And I think that goes for lessons too. I mean, if you can bring your child, whatever age, if they can understand even half of what's going on, then that's beneficial. I think that's fine. That's great. Talking about specifically the intention, basically we're going to be talking about trying to bring up very, very concrete everyday examples of what good intentions look like and what are different types of bad intentions and what they look like, and basically build that capacity that we were talking about to recognize when these things come in. So there's all sorts of different types of things that can come in and wreck our intention. Even if it's simply doing things automatically and not doing things with any purpose or any intention at all. That's one thing. Showing off, obviously, another big one. Having arrogance or loving people's praise. These are other things. So we're going to talk about a lot of those nuts and bolts specifics. We're going to talk about some of the surahs, the shortest surahs of the Quran that address these sorts of things. And we're even going to talk about some of the names of Allah that we can remember that will help us combat these sorts of things, inshallah.
Any other questions or comments? Okay, well, Jazakallahu khairan for everyone who attended. I hope you benefited. If you would like to see, more of this type of programming, feel free to get in touch through the email that you signed up with. I'll be touching base with everyone about recordings, and I hope some of you will join us for the class on sincerity. I know myself, my husband, our whole family, inshallah, plans to attend as well. And Jazakallahu khairan, Brother Tom, for your time and for teaching us today.
Alhamdulillah. Thank you. Thank you, everybody.
All right. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Wa alaikum assalam.